All right, so today we're diving into something I think is super useful for pretty much everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to be looking at some like essential, everyday English phrases,
Yeah.
the kind of stuff that can help you feel more confident and comfortable, whether you're traveling or living in an English-speaking country or just chatting with English speakers.
Yeah.
And we're actually pulling these phrases from episode 8 of the Master English podcast,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's a 30-day, English learning program, uh, particularly designed for, well, people in those situations,
Yeah.
people who are, thinking about moving to an English-speaking country or traveling or just want to level up their English communication skills.
Right. And I think what's cool about what we're doing today is, it's like a shortcut.
Yeah.
We're taking all the good stuff, the most useful phrases from this whole 30-day course and sort
Yeah.
of distilling it down to what you really need to know to get by in everyday situations.
Exactly. Like we're cutting through the noise and getting straight to the phrases that will actually help you navigate, those
Yeah.
daily interactions and feel more at ease.
Yeah. Less overwhelmed and more, ready to engage.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. And I think a natural place to start is with greetings,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Okay.
How do
Yeah.
we start those initial conversations and social interactions? And the podcast really, really stresses how important these first few words can be,
Yeah.
in terms of making a good impression and just generally coming across as friendly and approachable.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about laying that foundation.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is how a few simple phrases, like well-chosen phrases, can really, really establish that connection,
Yeah.
right off the bat. And they highlight some really, really key greetings.
Yeah.
Hey, how's it going? Which I'm sure you've heard a million times, but it's such a common, casual way to just check in with someone,
Mhm.
see how they're doing. Then, of course, there's the classic, nice to meet you, for when you're, introduced to someone new for the first time. And if it's someone you haven't seen in a while, how have you been is perfect for that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then for a friendly way to say goodbye, take care, is always a good option.
Yeah, those all seem pretty straightforward. But I like that they gave a really neat little tip about how to respond when someone asks, the classic, how are you?
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah.
Because, we all kind of fall into that habit of just saying fine, which can feel a little, I don't know, robotic or something.
Yeah, it can be a bit abrupt, a bit closed off.
But they suggested adding something like, I'm doing great, thanks.
Mm.
How about you?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that little addition makes such a difference.
It totally does. And if you think about what makes a conversation, flow naturally, that little how about you
Yeah.
is so key. It shows that you're not just, passively answering, you're actively inviting the other person to participate. It keeps that conversation going and it signals that you're, genuinely interested in them as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a simple way to build a little rapport right from the start.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so moving on. Let's talk about a situation that I'm sure many of us have experienced, which is being in a new place and needing directions.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how to get around. And the podcast actually calls these phrases the life-saving phrases
Right.
for asking directions and dealing with transportation.
Yeah, because let's be honest, is there anything more unsettling than feeling completely lost in an unfamiliar place?
No, it's the worst.
It's panic-inducing. So the source material gives us some really good phrases to kind of, anchor ourselves in those moments.
Yeah.
So first, you've got the polite and direct approach, which is, excuse me, could you tell me how to get to place? Super clear, super courteous. And then if you're already on your way, but you're not entirely sure you're going the right way, is this the right way to destination?
Yeah.
Which is always a good one to have. And then to get a sense of, how far you have to go, how far is place from here, is essential.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're relying on public transport, buses, subways, trains, knowing how to ask, which subway bus should I take to get to place, is going to be incredibly useful.
Yeah. And they give a really relatable example, to kind of bring it to life. They say, imagine you're in New York City.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
And you're trying to find Central Park. Like everyone wants to go to Central Park.
Yeah.
So, you can ask someone, excuse me, could you tell me how to get to Central Park?
Right.
And then they give a potential response, which is, sure, just walk 3 blocks down this street, then turn left.
Exactly.
And it just kind of shows you how these phrases, work in a real-world scenario.
Yeah, it makes it much more tangible, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And what I thought was really interesting, too, is that they also touch on how language can have these regional quirks,
Oh,
right?
sure.
Like even within, English-speaking countries, there are little variations in vocabulary and pronunciation that can sometimes trip you up.
Yeah, yeah.
And they have this pro tip about being aware of those differences. They just specifically mention, the word blocks, which is very common in the U.S., to describe distances.
Mm-hmm.
But in the U.K., you're much more likely to hear roundabout when people are talking about intersections, for example.
Right, yeah, different terms for the same thing.
Exactly. So keeping those little variations in mind can really help you understand, what people are saying and avoid any confusion.
Absolutely. It's all about those nuances.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's move on to another kind of universal experience, which is eating and shopping.
Right, the essentials.
The essentials, yeah.
Yeah.
And the podcast covers some really helpful phrases for ordering food in restaurants and cafes.
Yeah, and this is a great example of where a little politeness can go a long way.
Oh, for sure.
You want to make a good impression and just ensure that that interaction goes smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
So they give us some really good phrases like, I'd like a dish with side, please, which is, a clear and courteous way to place your order.
Mm-hmm.
And then for a quick coffee, could I get a coffee to go, please? Is perfect.
Yeah.
And then, if you're feeling a bit adventurous or maybe you're not sure what to choose, do you have any recommendations? Is a nice way to kind of engage with the server, get their input.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're ready to pay, could I have the bill check, please? Is essential.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just about food, right?
Right.
Like, they also highlight some key phrases for when you're out shopping, in different stores.
Right.
So you've got the very direct, how much does this cost?
Mm-hmm.
And the very practical, do you accept credit cards?
Yeah. Always good to know that.
Always good to know. And then, specifically for clothing stores, can I try this on?
Mm-hmm.
Is obviously essential.
Oh, for sure.
And I like that they emphasize, the value of politeness in these everyday transactions, with their pro tip, which is always remember to use please and thank you.
Oh, yeah. It seems so basic.
Yeah.
But it really does make a difference.
Yeah.
It's just a small gesture, but it shows respect and consideration, which is, appreciated universally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so this next area is maybe not the most fun to think about, but it's arguably one of the most important, which is knowing how to handle emergencies, and health situations.
Yeah.
And the podcast really stresses that having these key phrases ready can be absolutely crucial.
Yeah. No, it's all about preparedness.
Yeah.
Right? We sincerely hope you never have to use these phrases, but if something unexpected happens, having them, accessible in your mind can make a huge difference. So they list some really vital phrases for when you need help urgently, like, the very straightforward, I need help.
Mm-hmm.
Can you call the police?
Yeah.
Or I've lost my passport wallet.
Right. Yeah.
Like those are the kind of things that, you need to be able to communicate quickly and clearly.
Absolutely.
And then they also give phrases for, if you need to see a doctor or talk about your health.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not feeling well is a good starting point.
Yeah.
And then being able to describe specific symptoms like I have a headache or I have a stomach ache, I have a fever.
Mm-hmm.
And then the practical question, do you have something for symptom? Which could be incredibly useful if you need to visit a pharmacy, and get some over-the-counter medication.
Yeah. And their pro tip for travelers in this section is particularly good. Say, write down emergency numbers, and keep them somewhere easily accessible. Because, when you're in a stressful situation, it can be hard to think clearly, and you might not have access to your phone or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So having that information readily available can really save precious time.
Yeah.
And could be really important for your safety and peace of mind.
For sure. So, okay, to kind of bring everything together, we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, we have.
But I think it's been really valuable. We've gone through some incredibly useful phrases, all pulled from this great resource, the Master English Podcast. We started with greetings and how to kind of initiate those social connections.
Right, those first impressions.
Right, in a friendly way. And then we moved on to those essential questions for navigating new places, figuring out transportation.
Mm.
We talked about, ordering food, handling those transactions when you're shopping.
Right, those everyday interactions.
Exactly. And then, lastly, we address those really crucial phrases for emergencies and health situations.
Yeah, just being prepared for those unexpected moments.
Exactly. So as you're listening to this, think about how these phrases can really, really help you move through English-speaking environments, with greater confidence and ease.
Absolutely. And it's not just about memorizing words, right?
No.
It's about having those practical tools to connect with people
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
to handle those everyday situations effectively.
Exactly. So here's a final thought for you to kind of chew on. Thinking about those 4 areas that we covered: greetings, directions, food, and shopping, and emergencies. Which one do you feel like is your strongest area right now?
Yeah, good question.
And which one maybe you want to focus on a little bit more?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you feel most comfortable, and where could you maybe use a little extra practice?
Yeah, and maybe even more practically, is there one specific phrase from our deep dive today that you could actually see yourself using in a conversation later today?
Yeah.
Even if it's just for practice,
Right. Yeah.
just to try it out.
Just to kind of get it in your repertoire.
Yeah, exactly.
So give it some thought, and maybe trying out one of these phrases will be your next step towards feeling even more comfortable and confident in those English-speaking situations.
Absolutely. It's all about taking those small steps, building up that confidence over time.
Yeah, for sure.
So good luck out there.
Yeah, good luck. And thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.